putting together a presentation is more than a series of slides. It's
How are you taking them on a journey? People love to be on journeys.
If you don't love yourself and love your story, you will never be able to tell it effectively.
One of my favorite parts of doing this podcast has been reconnecting with friends. Our next guest on No Fear Presenting is Sarah Flaherty. I worked with Sarah for several years and was floored by her innate ability to focus on delivering the right information to the right audience at the right time in as clear and engaging a manner as possible. Truly phenomenal. And I'm so happy she agreed to be on with us today. She's currently a senior training manager at the International Association of Privacy Professionals. I know it's a big mouthful, but they have an acronym and they go by IAPP. So you can use that going forward. Look them up. Super interesting organization. But without further ado, I want to say hello. Hi, Sarah. Welcome. So nice to see you again.
Nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. So catch me up a little bit. Since we work together in the agency world, what have you been up to?
So since leaving the agency world, I knew I wanted to do sort of that similar work of creating, shaping content, having a say in how it was delivered and presented, kind of without the agency hustle and sales piece of it.
Right.
That's my comfort zone. So blending that with, what I knew would be things that were important to me in my personal life, not having to travel a ton, being able to be home for my family at the end of the day, led me to the IAPP, which is a short commute, and into work that I had been doing prior to getting into marketing work of learning development, instructional design, still involves a lot of overlapping skills with work like copywriting and brand development in terms of, clear communication, figuring out the information that a certain audience needs and when, and how to talk to that audience to be most useful to them.
Yeah. And so it seems like you're really feeling it. You're feeling fulfilled at this new position. I'm glad you found a home there. That's great.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah, it's been 8 years and it's a great mix of interesting work, really supportive and hardworking people, and the right mix.
Talking about the agency hustle, we got so in the trenches there. I don't feel like I got a chance to learn about where you grew up or where you came from. And it's my belief in this podcast that so much of what we learned growing up and the examples that people set for us around us form the way we present and the fears we have in getting in front of people. So I'd love to go back a little bit and talk about where you grew up and that kind of stuff. Is that cool?
Yeah, great.
Yeah. So where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Derry, New Hampshire, southern New Hampshire. So, doesn't get real big city in New Hampshire, but as far as New Hampshire goes, a bigger town. I went to a really large high school, and I don't know, thinking about getting into sort of the world of presenting, communicating. I think part of that was when I was younger, I got into dance pretty young and did theater stuff in high school. Right. And, was never star of the show, but just really loved that environment. And, it's interesting. I've thought about it a lot since then because I'm definitely an introvert. I need that quiet time to recharge, and which doesn't always fit with that theater kid stereotype.
Right? No, that's a stereotype, exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, I really enjoyed just kind of being on stage, pushing my body and my mind and my abilities in that way, even if I was never top of the bill.
Yeah, no kidding. I've heard that story over and over again. I can't stress enough how valuable I think theater experience is for kids, and I get so frustrated when I see budgets being pulled and those programs being pulled. Like you said, you don't have to be the star of the show, but being able to stand confidently on that stage and do your dance move or walk on and walk off is so valuable. It's so valuable. Now, what kind of dance did you do?
I did jazz, ballet, some modern, um, and continued that like all through high school, a little bit in college, a little
Yeah.
bit after, but it's harder to find adult classes. Was going to a studio for a while where it was like me and like 15 and 16-year-olds. It just was a
You're
little
right.
different.
Yeah.
But I actually recently, at the beginning of this year, started taking class again at a local studio where my daughters go.
Oh, nice.
And that was like kind of uh, I don't know. I think as you like get older, you get like less. Well, no, you're still scared of stuff, but you like. I don't. Is it okay to swear on your
Yeah,
podcast?
right. I hit the little box that says
Like,
explicit content. It's okay.
yeah, you just say fuck it and like say I'm gonna do this and um so I reached out to the studio owner and I said I know I'll know what's going on in this class, but like I might just not be able to go off the next day.
Right.
And she's
Yep.
like, come give it a try. So I've been taking ballet since January, which has been like such a so much fun because I'm doing it for me. I'm not doing it to, you know, ace an audition or something,
Right.
and it's like hard, and I just love the challenge of it, and it just is. I don't know. It's like really energized me.
Well, congratulations. I mean,
Yeah.
doing something, I speak from personal experience. I think I went through a tunnel of 20, 30 years where it was just everybody else's needs and work and
Sure.
doing something for yourself as an adult, I think is a huge milestone in
Yeah.
the continuing develop of being a human, It's
Right.
it's
For sure.
like I need to recharge and when you talk about being an introvert, I think that goes hand in hand with needing that, especially,
Mhm.
that you need that time where it's like, all right, now I cannot be outward focused. I can be inward focused just for a little
Yeah.
window. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So now growing up, did you have any folks in your family that seemed to dominate the family stage or be the storytellers? Who were your examples growing up for communication?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have an aunt who I actually didn't meet till I was older, who lives on the West Coast, who's very much a storyteller and very enthusiastic and in her passion for life. I mean, she's in her mid 70s now and is still just sent me a picture of her trying stand up paddleboarding the other day for the first time ever. So she just like loves adventure and the way she approaches life with passion and telling stories, I think has been an influence on me. Beyond that, I don't know. I don't really think of one person. I think of my my family are all kind of there's not like one standout role model.
Really? Are you the weirdo who's like, why are you getting up and training people? Are you the
I
bravest
don't
public
know. I mean,
speaker in
my
your
mom was
family?
a teacher,
Oh,
so I
okay.
guess she was that, had that in her profession too.
Right.
But like I don't think I mean I wasn't my family are like New England wasps. Like we weren't like no like nobody was like da, 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 like on stage,
Right. Yeah.
getting so yeah.
I gotcha. So what do you attribute to your evolution? I mean, you went from high school kid, background player in theater shows, but now you have to take a leading role in your work life. How do you think that evolution went? Walk me through it. Do you remember being scared to talk to people?
Okay.
Yeah. And
Um,
and how have you kind of grown past that and evolved past that?
I mean, a lot of getting over questions of what to say, how to say it is like time and experience. Like getting to work with different people, getting to be in different professional environments. I think one thing that might be obvious, but that I remember sort of dawning on me kind of probably around the time that we were working together 8 to 10 years ago was understanding somebody else's communication style is like so key to effectively delivering what you want to say to them. And I'm thinking more about like office dynamics in
Right.
relationship with different teams or levels in an organization where you can write a beautiful precise email to somebody, but if they're the type to speak better in a quick hit conversation, that might just fly right by them, and that's not the effort. That's not a good way to invest your time and effort.
That's such a
So
good point. Yeah, they might not just be a reader, they might be buried in emails, and a long form beautiful
right.
email is just not the way to get to them. That's so insightful. And I want to slow down here for a second because you also said something else that I really find valuable. It's the practice, putting the time in to actually get up on your feet and say the words and try it out
Yeah.
coming out of your mouth, and there's
Yeah.
no substitute for putting in those hours. I actually
Yeah.
have a memory of you rehearsing a presentation for some big pitch that we were going in, and you were sitting at your chair and you were looking at your monitor. And I don't know if I said it at the time, but I've had that experience since where people practice like that. They kind of sit there and they quietly word out what they want to say, which is, valuable
Yeah.
to them and whatever. But I think there's added value when you actually get up in front of your kitchen or in front of the mirror and say it at full volume and actually feel those words coming out of you, and then add a slide clip to it so that you can get that sense of timing and drama and unveiling.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah, 100%, and I think I remember the time that you're talking about because you said something like, "Okay, this is fine, but you've gotta, like, be a little bit more excited about it, be a little more, animate," like and what it came down to is if you're not excited about what you're saying, your audience isn't gonna be either, and,
yeah,
like, even if you're sort of acting, right? Like,
yeah,
it doesn't which doesn't mean it's fake. It's part of the package as much as your visuals are, You've gotta sound like you care about what you're saying and that you haven't done it 50 times, on your own or with an audience of one, and that it is something that people should be excited about. And that lesson, we might be jumping ahead a little bit, but I had the opportunity with a colleague of mine to present at a learning industry conference uh, a little over a year ago. And I mean, it was just so clear the difference. Every time we would practice our presentation, it was like, oh, that was better. That
right.
was better.
Yeah,
And the
yeah,
first few times we did it, we'd say to each other, "Okay," she did one chunk and then I did the next, and we'd say, "Okay, how was that?" And I remember telling her, like, that same thing, like, you know what you're talking about and you're good at this, but you've gotta, like, act it a little more, like,
yeah.
kind of
You,
own it, like, claim that expertise, like, that's okay to do.
yeah, you can love a hamburger, and in your day-to-day life, you can tell people you love a hamburger by saying, "I love hamburgers." And that's fine for you. And I'm not telling you to change your day-to-day life, but
Right.
if you want people to go explore a new hamburger joint, that's not going to do it. You got to say, "I love hamburgers, and this hamburger was juicy for these reasons." It's a
Yes.
whole different experience because that's what humans have done for each other over millions of years. We've relayed the energy so that they felt motivated, the audience felt motivated to get up and go do that action. Such good stuff. And I feel like if you don't have theater in your background like we did, it's there are other opportunities in your community where you can feel undercover. Like there are Toastmasters, there are these slide events like Pachakacha, which, is the first thing coming to mind, of course, that you can go and just risk stuff without inviting family and friends and get that time in if you didn't have that background. So great point, Sarah. I really appreciate you bringing that up. And I love the idea of owning it, bringing the energy to it, because it is,
Right.
it's right. There's your day-to-day life, and then there's presenting, and it's a different energy.
Yeah, and speaking with authority, people in this circumstance at this conference, like we were presenting this session, people could come to it by choice. It was like a time block where you would choose between however many offerings. So they want to hear what we're going to say,
Right.
So taking that authority and really trying to appear confident, even though, we all have, I think it's true that if you're not a little bit nervous, then maybe you're not,
Doing it right.
maybe you're missing something.
Yeah.
But, again, just doing it. I mean, we just ran through it so many times, and then I would record myself doing it if I was on my own, and then nobody likes to hear their own voice, so I wouldn't even listen to the
Absolutely.
recording half the
Right.
time,
Yeah.
but to know, okay, that time it took me 12 minutes, or that time. Because the other thing I have found is that when it sort of seems counterintuitive if you're at all nervous about public speaking, but you will go on and on more than you think you do.
Right.
And
Right. Yeah.
then it's like, oh, I think our session was maybe an hour, but we wanted to save a chunk for questions at the end. So it would be like, oh, we're at 40 minutes and we're only like halfway through. Like
Yeah.
that's not good. So, and also kind of trusting your audience to keep up with you, and you're not going and not have to like over explain everything and keep it can be hard to step back and
Yeah.
realize what you said.
And look at yourself objectively. That's why I love the idea that you use video recordings, because I forgot to mention that when I'm talking about those community opportunities. But yeah, you got in your pocket a powerful tool, and putting your phone in the back of the room can not only help you see what your body language is and how much enthusiasm you're bringing. Also, are you being loud enough? That phone's at the back of the room. So if you sound really low in the audio, chances are you're not speaking loud enough. So that'll give you the opportunity and the info that you need to adjust what you're doing.
Yes.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
cool.
Awesome. Great advice so far. Look at you helping the audience left and right already. All right. So dance, theater, your mom was a teacher. Okay, I see how you moved into the communication world and you started doing the training and whatnot. Tell me about your experience at IAPP. What is it?
Yeah. So as you said, International Association of Privacy Professionals, and it's one of those things that we all interact with privacy in the official sense more than we think we do. If you think about those, you're downloading an app or you're reading, you get an email and you have to accept the terms before you continue. All that information that details what happens with the personal data that you are entering into a service or, agreeing to before using a technology or a service, that's all privacy, or it's sometimes called data protection. And so what we do is we're a professional organization for people who work in that space. So who write those privacy policies, or who have to decide, what happens if I just got a thing this morning about a data breach that, my information might have been.
Right. Was that the AT&T one?
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw that same headline.
Great,
and it happens
cool.
every day, right?
Yeah. Right. So
here's the thing, though. When you're describing what IAPP does, I would imagine 15 years ago, the biggest challenge of talking about that organization would have been people tuning out. Oh my God, this sounds so boring. But now we're surrounded by those click boxes and those agreements we're supposed to understand, and getting caught in loopholes and seeing those headlines. I would imagine now people lean in the minute you say that you're involved with that discipline and that industry. Would you say that's
Yeah.
true?
I would, and I would have thought actually when I started, I thought this could be really dull. This
Right.
might be really boring. It's a lot, and it can be a lot of like legalese and nitty gritty law stuff. But because literally all of us are affected and are needing to think about now. I mean, if you have we're all thinking about how much do you put yourself on social media? What are your privacy settings? Can the public just go and read all about your life?
Right.
Can they see pictures of your kids? Do you want to put your kids on social media? Like all of that is privacy, and even more so now with AI becoming so dominant are these questions of how AI is going to interact with personal information,
Right.
what the models are trained on, what content you may or may not be supplying to train
Yeah.
an AI.
How are they going to use your data and your private information? Well,
Yeah,
not so much private information, because that's the trick, isn't it? The minute you put it out there, it's not anymore.
sure, right. And
Yeah.
even if you don't purposely put it out there, there are these data breaches that are constantly happening that
Good point. Yeah.
you didn't intend to, but now what happens. And so to bring it back to what we do, we train and educate those people who make those decisions and deal with all that as their job. We host conferences for them. We have several certifications so they can have a you know credential to show in their profession the level of skill and qualifications that they have. So it's really interesting work, and it's grown a ton and is only continuing to.
Yeah. So to put it in simple guy language, do the Metas and the Instagrams and big professionals of the world come to your organization and say, okay, we want to do this app, this software. How do we protect ourselves? How do we get the data we want and be fair to our, is that the role that
Yes.
IAPP serves?
Yes, essentially. They may not come to us and say, "How do we do this?" They may they would be more actively making those decisions within their organization using the sort of foundation and like
Right.
peer conversations and um we have like daily email newsletters. So to follow along with like what's happening in the industry, what law just passed in Texas or whatever that now applies to my organization because we do business there. So, arming them, giving them the connections and the support that they need to then go into the weeds internally.
Gotcha. So now that's the private commercial space. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, and something I think is so vital with this whole AI conversation, is the government. Now, is your organization interacting with government officials and educating them?
A bit. We did used to have a certification that was for government and public sector professionals. The majority of our work now is for private sector, but it's not. Even nonprofits are sort of part of that because
Gotcha.
any organization dealing with customer data, member data, any data that has to do with another human being is personal data. So it may
Right.
not be like a big bank or Meta or one of those huge organizations. It could be a regional grocery chain or
Yeah.
or like I said, a nonprofit or a foundation or somebody that's dealing with donors or payment information or all of that is impacted by law, even by customer expectations. So there's what the law says, which is a lot in a lot of places,
Right.
but then there's also the PR element of it where you may not be obligated to do something by law, but it's not a good look to, not disclose a certain level of a breach or to not be communicative with your customers.
Or to
So
sell all your data that you're mining to a campaign, which,
exactly.
yeah. I think a lot of people were shocked during the last election that that's actually going on, and it was totally legal. But
Yep.
yeah, I can see that being a point. Now, huge picture, immense, and so vital a discussion in this
Right.
period in history. So cool for you to be at the epicenter of that. But what now, drilling down to your role, what does your day to day look like? What do you do within that context?
Yeah. So I work on a team of about 20 people, and I oversee about half of that team who develops and maintains all of our training courses. So
Okay.
primarily we have online self-paced classes as well as instructor-led classes which might be in person or might be a live online environment, and primarily, those classes aim to train people to then take one of our certification exams and obtain a privacy or AI governance now certification. So we're designing courses that cover a ton of information. A lot of it is dense.
Yeah.
A lot of it is legal. And the stakes are high for our learners because most of them are aiming to get certified, and the exams are very rigorous. We try to equate it a lot to maybe like the bar exam, a little bit different
Yeah.
ecosystem, but I think a lot of people also have an expectation of like, okay, I sat through this 2-day training class, like I'm good.
Right.
And, where we're really aiming to measure like a level of mastery, it's a lot of times we're explaining like, no, you probably wouldn't have gone to a college class for a semester and then walked into the exam without any prep. There's studying and
Yeah.
reading and review and a lot, just like making a presentation,
Yeah.
you're over and over trying to
You got to
get
do
this
the
in.
work. Yeah. Yeah. You
Yeah.
do the research. Now, I was excited to talk to you because a lot of clients who are doing your average PowerPoint or presentation in their organization come to me and they're like, well, this is very technical and it's a very technical audience and there's a lot of components. And I thought, well, Sarah's probably dealing with the densest, most technical information out there. How do
Yeah.
you tackle organizing or planning out one class? Like, how do you
Mhm.
plan it out? How do you
Mhm.
structure that?
So we are, I guess, lucky in a sense where our certification team who creates and builds the exams has something called a body of knowledge, which is essentially this very detailed outline of here are all the topics that you'll be asked about and you need to know about. So we also will use that as a guide and sort of a map to say, okay, this is everything we have to cover. Of course, that only goes so far because then we have to figure out, all right, how do we, talk about this provincial Canadian healthcare law
Right,
and make it interesting
right,
or memorable. And I think there's a couple ways we try to do that. One is understanding that it's okay that the material's dense and it's okay that it's complex because that's what's required in this situation.
right,
And that's what our learners want. If they could read the cliff notes or, a blog and get the information, they wouldn't be investing in a very intense training course.
right,
So it's kind of going back to that idea of like, well, who is your audience and what are they looking for?
right,
And understanding as well that those fundamental principles of learning of here's the information, here's the detail. Now, we don't want to let too much time go by without going back and reviewing that. So we might have one module of content that at the end is going to have a scenario or a case study or review or discussion questions to take this complex information and then apply it or think through, Joe Schmo, the privacy officer, what should he do in this situation and what questions should he ask? And, offering that opportunity for application and reflection.
Yeah, yeah. It's a great point you're making, that it's basically communication fundamentals. It's understanding who your audience is. And in your case here, you've got this body of knowledge database or document. So that's kind of serving as your audience. This is the audience's expectation for this course. You also know that someone is paying for this person to be certified, so they can't just see the Cliff Note version. They actually have to be tested and proven that they've ingested this information and can utilize it correctly. So knowing that about your audience and their expectations affects the density of the material. And like you said, that totally makes sense. And so now when you're doing that, I found it interesting that you're at the same time questioning now, how do we make this kind of palpable, interesting? How do we not put them to sleep? How much do you use timing and the science of timing for that thought process? Because I would imagine you can't just talk at somebody for 4 hours or have them read 50 slides in a row.
No, and it's always, it's a constant balance of that, because we're also kind of competing with the logistics of any given class. So we may, at some of our larger events, we might be running a class that has 100 people in it. So the instructor in that environment will be doing more lecture than they would like small group discussion, because there's just too many people.
Right.
But we try to think about that, where are there opportunities to have people talk to each other, to share their own experience, some of it is taking breaks too,
Yeah.
taking
Right.
a 2-minute stretch break or a lunch break or whatever it is. We also offer some different options where you could go and take a class for 2 days, 8 hours on each day, or you could do like a live online version, which might have 2 hours of class time over several days that are a little bit. So some of it's just knowing, your own personal preference and
Yeah, so you
time.
give the audience options. You can take it in this way or that way, which is nice. It goes back to what you were saying about people ingest information or communication in different ways. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's very cool. Now, do you train the trainers? Or are you involved in helping instructors to learn how to be better instructors?
A little,
A
a
little, okay.
little. A lot of our faculty members are experts in their field. Some of them are like very accomplished lawyers that have been in the privacy and data protection world for a long time. Some of them are private consultants. Um, so they know the material really well, which is really critical, because that's sort of the other thing that we rely on. It's a little bit different for our online self-paced, because that doesn't have an instructor.
Right.
But for anything that's instructor led, we really do rely on them to add their own anecdotes and experience and um, how they've tackled some of these challenges in the real world. So they know a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
They have to do like what do I want to say? Like a training, like a practice run where they might just do one section of a class, and then we would give them feedback and evaluate it. And we have learner evaluations where they will get feedback on, their presentation style, and get to hear from people what they thought worked and didn't work so well.
And
So
you're
we're
part of a committee that does that, makes the review of those instructors and their sample sections.
I am not personally, but members of my team are.
Oh, that's cool. All right. Is there anything that you noticed is there a pattern for instructors that are more effective or more compelling than others? Do you happen to notice anything?
Yes, definitely. And I think it's kind of what we were saying before, like the people who have done it a lot. I mean, sometimes that can veer into somebody's style getting a little bit stale, but I think more often than not, at least with our faculty, uh, people get into because they know the material so well, they can um, speak to it very clearly. They've gotten all kinds of different questions from the learners, so they can anticipate a question. They can share something that someone else has asked that has helped, illuminate a concept for other people. They can tell those stories that, from their own life, which really I think the more somebody teaches a class or a concept, the more comfortable they get with it and the more natural it feels.
Okay, so effective trainers practice a lot, have a lot of experience. Would you say they can know when to integrate personal to help facilitate learning? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Also, maybe integrating past experience in the learning environment to anticipate future learning needs. Okay, that's all good advice, I think, for presenters and trainers in any field. So those are some nice tips there. What gets in their way? What have you seen trainers struggle with?
I think a lot of times it is some of those more logistical elements that they may not have control over, like size of the room, or one thing we always see on our learner evaluations is it was too cold. It was too cold,
Really? Yeah.
which is so really affects people's experience. If they're not physically comfortable or they're hungry or whatever it is.
Absolutely.
Um,
But you don't have any control over it.
Totally.
Yeah, I'm learning that no matter what kind of building or facility you build, and this is funny because this just happened to me yesterday. I was walking through this brand new office, state-of-the-art AC HVAC system, and they said our biggest complaint is that people are cold or too hot.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I don't think you can ever solve for that. Like, imagine a training of 100 people. You're still
Yeah.
going to get 50 people just run hot or run cold,
Right. Right.
It's so funny. That's so yeah, that I could see that being a struggle. The things you can't control. How about the things they can control? What's the biggest hurdles that you're seeing for? And I say that loosely because some things you think they could control it, like, I don't know, being too verbose, for instance. You think somebody can control that, but some folks just can't. They just can't get out of their own way.
Yeah, and so, I mean, again, experience, but if you
Right.
don't if you've gotta do it and you don't have experience, practicing and then being willing and open to hearing the feedback because that's hard no matter who you are and how,
Right.
self-assured you feel, like, it's not easy to hear, like, "Oh, they just rambled and rambled," or, "I didn't understand this," or, "That wasn't" whatever. And people will be, especially when they're paying money for a class, very honest in what they thought. But I think being able to receive feedback constructively is huge because there is a lot of wisdom in that too,
Yeah.
and
Right.
whether it's like slowing down your pace or speaking more clearly or allowing learners the opportunity to ask questions. Or maybe you're allowing too many people to ask questions and it's not, you got to move it along a little
Right.
more.
Right. Pacing
So
yourself.
being
Yeah.
able to hear that
Yeah.
is really
And learn
important.
from it. Gotcha.
Right.
I gotcha. All right. So ingesting feedback, learning to adapt as a result of it is a good way for people to learn how to be better trainers/speakers. Awesome. Now, you and I put together our fair share of pitch decks, and we put those together to be emotion driven, minimal words, so that we were the experts in the room, and beautiful and compelling, et cetera, et cetera. Now, instructional design, you just told us that, it's okay sometimes to be dense because that's what the audience is there. Is there any other difference between, presentation A and instructional design? What would you say the
Yeah.
biggest difference that strikes you as far as the way the slides or the information is structured?
I think even though there may be differences in depth of content, some of those fundamental principles around good design and effective communication don't change. So
Mm,
we might have a slide that needs to convey a lot of information, but think about, we also have an accompanying participant guide. So that may
yeah,
be the place where we can include a lot more detail and text
gotcha.
and rely on the instructor to know, okay, here's this image and a short phrase, and you need to speak to, X, Y, and Z on that screen. Or for our self-paced online trainings where there's no presenter, it's even more important to think about how can we convey information without doing like a ton of text that's just
Right.
essentially reading a book. Or I think the other thing that maybe earlier on when I was first learning some of these training authoring tools is there's so much visual potential and capabilities that it's like, oh, I could have this animate on here, and then this could come here, and then that fades off, and then that turns black and white, and then, and that's the cool balancing like the cool factor with like, no, it can be okay for somebody to look at the same image for 20 seconds because they're digesting the voiceover that's going along with it, or
Right.
um,
Yeah, it's a
so
temptation to make it look like MySpace page from, what was that, mid
right.
90s, right? Yeah.
Right,
Gotcha.
and we've moved more towards using video for the online trainings too, and, it's not a revolutionary idea, but knowing the right time and place in an online course to just have somebody like you and I are talking now, who's just speaking, and you can, even though you're not interacting with them live, you're hearing from a real person who's done the real work and is sharing some experience and is explaining it in conversational English and not in, textbook definition, precise scripted voiceover. Sometimes that more conversational approach can be captured and delivered through the simplicity of like a recorded Zoom conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would imagine getting experts at such a high level, they're not going to be able to sit through a million seminars. But if you record them once, then you can use them,
Yeah.
in a much wider way.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Anything else strike you about visuals, about how they can hurt or hinder? I think you did a good job of talking about it, not to get too excited with animations and transitions. Is there any other ways you can think of that visuals can hinder a good instructional course?
Yeah, I think in our sector, privacy, there's a lot of overlap with technology and security, and it can be very hard to find images that aren't just like a lock or like somebody at a computer,
Right.
or to kind of break out of the literal elements of it.
Yeah.
And I think we're thinking about the same things that most organizations are in terms of accessibility and representation and inclusion, and thinking, and because we serve an international audience, um thinking about symbols or things that might have, or colors that might have a different significance in Asia versus North America or something. So
Ooh, okay.
a lot of times it's knowing enough to ask the question, even if you don't personally know cultural norms in another part of the world. So that's been really interesting to me to think about.
Do you have
What
people you work with that check your presentations for cultural sensitivity?
Yeah, we have people who are more familiar with different languages, different areas of the world where we're doing business. And like recently we were working on a product based on Chinese data protection law, and we're thinking about is it important to have an actual representation of a learner in this, and if so, should they be of Asian descent? And
Yeah,
if so, do they need to be ethnically Chinese, or is it okay if they're Korean? So like a lot of
right.
questions that we may not think about as North Americans, or our answer may be appropriate to us, but not fit with the cultural norms or what is important to see in that part of the world for it to feel authentic.
Yeah, yeah. Lucky that you have that group. I
Yeah.
worry about that a lot, especially with our capabilities now to post something online, a training a module or whatever, as a smaller business that can go global. I'm always concerned. Did I check enough? Did I consider enough? And it's always a fear, I think, in any reasonable person's mind that's
Mhm.
releasing
Sure.
content to the world.
Yeah.
Okay, so good things to consider there. Now, you are also a busy mom, a busy wife. You have a mom and all these other non-professional things. Are there any things that came in from your professional life that helped you in those roles in your personal life, or vice versa? Is there anything raising, children that has helped you in your professional life? I'm always curious about that interplay.
Yes, for sure. I think being a parent, you I think your priorities change, first of all.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
I've said it to other parents before, like, you have less time for bullshit. So, like, especially in the workplace, I think in any job, you just get more, especially if you're a person that wants to spend time with your kids and your family at the end
Right?
of the day, you
Yeah, you
are
got
perhaps.
15 minutes. I got to go pick up my kid. What is your point? Yeah,
Yeah, right. So
right.
maybe you're more driven, or you're more efficient, or you're thinking about that stuff. I think also learning more about people. I've had situations, especially growing into a management role and being a direct supervisor of a team. There are challenges and times where, we've had to work through some tough stuff, and I've had to make tough decisions about people's roles, and recognizing when it's appropriate, how to coach and mentor people versus parenting them, and sort of having that line of
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
personal responsibility, and how to convey that maybe to another adult that
Right.
is not your child.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
just I think just those personal dynamics, and that element of like, you can be a really strong individual contributor and a really poor manager, because there are in so many businesses, I think high performers get promoted into management roles, and the two are not necessarily
Yeah. Managing
correlated.
people is so different than being good at your job.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you know what I think a lot about with my experience raising children is one of my biggest fears when I was younger was to risk the impact of saying something wrong, of saying something and having someone react strongly to me. But as a parent, with kids, especially in the young years, they're all id. And when you say something that displeases them, you get, immediate reaction, immediate
Yeah.
emotional impact there. It has taught me that no matter how difficult the business conversation is, at least it's not as horrible as, telling my child that they couldn't go somewhere they wanted to go. It makes you, I think, stronger as a communicator in some ways, or braver. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. And also understanding, I think and this has probably changed over generations, but I think a lot of parents these days are also more willing to go back to your children and say that you were wrong about something or you
Right.
overreacted or
Right.
whatever. And, to have that practice and that humility to also be able to do that in the workplace. And, there are times that I've said, hey, I didn't mean to come off this way if you interpreted it that way, that wasn't my intention, or,
Right.
to kind of have those conversations and clear the air and be able to move on and acknowledge stuff and be honest so that you can then get back to the work at hand and
Yeah.
recognize that you're there to do a job, but that people are humans and have feelings and, that's important as well.
Yeah. Yeah. But basically, I'm proud that a lot of us are trying, at least some more successful than others, to be more human at work and stop pretending that we're always right, that, it's always move forward, never look back. I think, apologizing, being humble, acknowledging, taking accountability. That's where I'm trying to grow, and and I think I
Yeah.
see a lot of people around me trying to do the same thing.
Mhm.
Now, I want to be sensitive to time. I know we said till noon, but we fumbled around in the beginning. I do have a couple more questions for you.
Yeah,
Are you
super.
okay if I hit them?
Yeah.
So you recently presented at a big event. I was curious, what struck you as the biggest difference in the way you prepared for your speaking at this event versus
Mhm.
speaking in a training?
So in my role, I'm not a trainer. So I will be, I might help design a course or I might review somebody else's course design. Um, and I might, speak at a meeting in front of my team of 20 or,
Right.
or in
Yeah.
front of larger groups at work, but I don't train people. I'm not, speaking in front of crowds of strangers often.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Um, so in preparing for that presentation, it was a lot of the stuff we've talked about, like just doing it over and over, stepping away for a while and then coming back and looking at the slides again or looking at my notes again and
Oh, that's a
having
good
enough
tip. Yeah. Yeah. Step away
yeah,
from the
having enough
material.
distance from
Yeah.
it to say, "Oh, you know, now that I've stepped away, I never talked about this here, but that seems like the question that somebody might have,"
Right.
or, "Oh, this slide actually has a typo on it that I didn't see because I just looked at it too much,"
Right.
or, whatever it is. And then I think knowing that I know for me, if I am nervous about something, the only way it's like that saying, "The only way out is through."
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
I just have to do the thing, and then I'll feel better, and, preparation, rehearsing, all that stuff is super important and makes a huge difference, but then it's kind of just doing it, Like,
Right.
I am a person who, in various times in my life, has struggled with anxiety and, worrying about things that might be out of my control, and to know to get comfortable with the idea that, like, as long as I've done the things I can control, the outcome's not gonna change if I worry more.
Right. Right.
So, kind of just trusting that trust your preparation, trust the people who've helped you prepare, trust your technology, doing all the things you can to ensure that that is as down pat as it's going to be, and then
Yeah.
just kinda
Just doing the
rolling
thing.
with it.
Stepping off the ledge.
Right.
That's great. I love that. Good advice for the audience. Now, who inspires you?
Professionally, I'm a big fan of Brené Brown,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
She's
all her
amazing.
work around communication and vulnerability, and I think I have learned a lot from my current boss, my director, who is very smart, very sort of this really cool combination of super smart, but also kind without being
Nice.
soft, like
Right.
very kind and human, um, but also not afraid to, you know, have high expectations, ask detailed questions. To one thing I also admire about her is her ability to deliver sometimes difficult information without apologizing for it. Um,
Nice. Right.
and
What a
I think
great
in any
quality.
organization, especially when there's multiple levels of management and you are somewhere in the middle, you know, there's you're communicating up and you're communicating down, and being able to, you know, message as all one team versus us and them, or, you know, you have to do this, and I know it's stupid, or, you know, things like that,
Right. Right.
I think are so important in the vibe of the group as a whole and keeping people energized and um re- being real without, you know, sometimes things don't need like your values judgment on it, they just need to be heard,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. She seems like an inspirational person. Wow.
it was
Yeah.
awesome. Yes.
That's very cool. Awesome. What are you afraid of? Since this is the No Fear Presenting podcast, I like to ask that question as we're wrapping
Yeah.
up. What are you afraid of and how do you get over it?
Do you mean in work or like,
Take that question wherever it takes you, Sarah.
I mean, there's
You
like,
can keep it
you
professional.
know, the existential threats to democracy, the
Oh, God.
climate change,
Went
you know, you
there.
name it.
Oh, gosh.
There's
I
a
was
lot to
trying
be
to have
afraid.
50 minutes without thinking about it.
So and when it comes to work, I mean, I think a lot of times the things that I'm afraid of, aside from like, you know, if you're working somewhere and like business is not going well and you're afraid of, you know, the safety of your job, I mean,
Right.
that's a sort of a different category of fears. But I think in terms of just like worrying or fear around like success or how to do something well, or, you know, a lot of times for me it's just going through it
Yeah.
and knowing that I'm going to feel better once I face that, even if the outcome, you know, whatever way the outcome goes.
Right.
So if it's, you know, if I'm struggling with an employee who's not doing their job, or, you know, to my expectation, like, then I just have to have the conversation, you
Yeah.
know, like,
Just got
it's
to rip
not.
off the Band-Aid and go. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and I think it's the same with, you know, like I recently, sent an email to someone higher up in the company that I just wanted to, like, sit down and have a conversation with, and, you know, I felt a little bit nervous just asking without like, "Okay, we need to have this meeting and talk about this project and this work," but to say like, "Hey, I just wanna sort of talk to you and hear about your experience and how you got where you are, and,
Yeah.
you know, are you open to that?"
Right.
And
Talking to
let it.
someone outside of the professional to-do list, talking to them about more ethereal things or the experience of work.
Right.
Yeah, I can see that
Yeah.
being scary. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so a
Because
lot of
you
times
feel
for me.
safe when you got that like to-do list, right?
Yes,
Right.
yes. So I think a lot of times for me, it's just doing the thing, letting that, you know, those physical elements of like, "Ooh, my heart's racing a little bit," or "I'm feeling a little, ooh, like, nervous about it," knowing that all that is going to go away once I do it, you know, whether it goes well or it goes badly, it's I
Right.
walk through it, you know?
Right. So you help yourself to get through it by picturing going through it, getting through it, and being done with it, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and trusting past experience in that way,
Oh,
like,
good point.
you know, that, okay, I've had a hard conversation before, I've been, and I know that I'm gonna feel better as soon as those words are out,
Right.
but it doesn't feel good now, you know, but I know that will happen, so,
Gotcha.
you know, doing it.
Awesome. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
people can take that to heart and learn from that. That's awesome, Sarah. All right. Anything else that you are thinking about as a result of our conversation that you want to mention or talk about?
Think so. No, I think we covered a lot.
No, I think so too. I appreciate your time. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, it was nice catching up and keep doing that good work. Privacy is super important out there,
Yes,
we're all
is.
wringing our hands about AI stealing all our data and lives and
Yeah.
everything else. So yeah, we need folks out there putting up the guardrails.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Responsibilities.
Thank you, Sarah. Take care.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Bye.
Bye.